Hi, this is Dr. Kimberley Linert, author of Visualizing Happiness in Every Area of Your Life and host of this podcast, Incredible Life Creator. And today I have Mr. Jeremy McDonald on. How are you this morning?
I'm good, Kimberly. How are you?
I am great. And Jeremy McDonald is a seasoned learning and development professional with a master's degree in adult education and an impressive 25-year journey shaping the corporate and personal landscape. Jeremy has left an indelible mark on esteemed organizations such as 1-800 Accountant, HSBC, Metlife, Primo Water, and New York Life Insurance. A true luminary in the field, Jeremy has seamlessly navigated roles as a sales and leadership trainer, motivational speaker, and executive coach. His expertise extends beyond the boardroom, as he has also graced spiritual events, including engagements at Unity and Spiritual churches. Jeremy is not just a speaker, he is a new thought speaker, bringing up a unique blend of spiritual wisdom to corporate and self help settings. In addition to his remarkable career, Jeremy McDonald is a three-time best-selling author, sharing his insights and wisdoms in the written word. Jeremy also hosted a transformative podcast for an impressive 11 years, culminating on the Los Angeles Tribune Roku network, where his thought-provoking discussions reached a broad and engaged audience. As a mindset mastery coach and quantum healer, Jeremy transcends boundaries, seamlessly blending the spiritual and corporate worlds. Join Jeremy McDonald on a transformative journey where the realms of spiritual insight, self help, and corporate excellence converge for a holistic approach to personal and professional growth. Well, that is quite a resume from the corporate to the spiritual. I'm excited to hear your story.
Awesome. Well, I'm glad. Thank you for having me here, and I'm excited to talk about my work. And yeah,
Yeah, so where did this all start? I mean, did it just start in childhood with a dream or when did this all start?
well, that is actually is a story. And it does funny enough start in childhood, but I won't go back that far. Honestly, it started with my mother about 20, getting close to 26 years now. She asked me to go to an event where there was a Reiki healer, and I thought that it was just absolutely crazy. And I went. I had a headache when I got there, and I didn't have a headache when I left. So when it was gone within just a few seconds, and so that just kind of started me on a journey. And then on the opposite side, I always say that my corporate world and my spiritual world kind of work hand in hand because they helped with my development as a person. And so roughly about the same time, I was in corporate before I went to the healing circle, but I had a boss of mine ask me to come and do a train the trainer kind of customer service class. And I literally just I call it the trainer's bug. And the reason why this is kind of a profound story in that sense is that I was actually a very shy kid. There would have been no way you would have asked me to come on a podcast, to stand on a stage, any of those kind of things. But what happens when you stand in front of public, in front of a group of people, you kind of get over that shyness real quick and you don't really have a choice. And so 26 years later, I remember the first time I stood on a stage, I was shaking. I don't know if anybody remembers those big baggy jeans that we used to wear called Jenkos, and we'd wear them, because I thought I was a skateboarder, even though I couldn't actually skateboard. And it's my legs were shaking in those jeans. They were shaking so bad, but luckily I was wearing those, and you couldn't see that. And so that's really just kind of started me on the journey. And then just started getting really curious about self-development. And I ran across a book called by a gentleman named Marvin Kistler, and it was called The Stranger Within. And it was literally just about the inner child work and working with that inner child and that part of ourselves that's scared to step out. And then I learned about Carl Jung and Abraham Maslow, and then the movie What the Bleep Do We Know came out, and that really just shifted my life. And of course, the age-old Secret movie, and just kept on going on. But those things were just got me curious, because then I wanted to know more. So But what I started to do is to take all those principles and practice them on myself because like I mentioned, very shy kid, very insecure, very self-criticizing. And so I started to look at a process of diving into myself to look at the energetic blocks in my body because I looked at it and I thought, those energetic blocks are all that doubt. Those are all those generational trauma. That's all that pain that's going on inside of me. And it took me a while to be able to verbalize that and understand that. But fast forward to 2012, my mother passed away. And my mother was at that point, a shaman and had really explored the energy work and healing work and was a nurse on top of that and really and had taught me a lot of stuff. But as a son, normal son, I didn't really listen too much. And then on the other side, I could hear her. I could hear her talking to me and I could hear her speaking to me. And I could still hear her saying my full name with my middle name too, and saying, and so, and what she would do is she would say, "Do you remember when I said this?" And I would remember, and it
Mhm.
would really kind of solidify things that she had taught me that I didn't necessarily kind of like would let it go in one ear and out the other. But parents, your kids are actually listening. They're just trying to act like they're not listening, and it really helped them verbalize. So then I worked on myself and healed myself, and that's of course a lifelong process. And so I like to share what I've learned about myself with other people. And so I call my business storytelling alchemist because you change your inner story and then you alchemize your inner world from lead heavy thoughts to gold, those lighter thoughts. And then you'll really start to change the dynamics of your life. And that movie, The Secret,
Mhm.
it works better when you're actually in a flow state as opposed to sitting on the couch trying to get that Corvette, but you feel like that's never happened. This is just a joke or a game or stuff like that. So, yeah, that's probably a long explanation, but it's it's the explanation of how I got started in this world.
Great. So when you work with people with their stories, what does that look like?
Well, what I do is I use my intuition, of course, but I'm not one of those types of people that's going to sit there and try to be Miss Cleo, so to speak, or and I really just sit down and say, talk to me. What's going on. What I'm looking for is the energy. I'm trying to feel the energy of what's going on within them. And I had a woman recently that really had a lot of issues going on in her life. She had problems with her kids. She really wanted to do something with her life. She was scared to step forward. I mean, it is very obvious that there was an attachment issue to what was going on in her life. And it wasn't just her kids, it was work and everything else. And she was a young professional. And I said, what happened in childhood that made you feel like you couldn't just shine brightly, that you had to put everybody else first other than yourself? And she started just talking about her mother and, how her mother basically told her that you have to not be selfish and you have to put your kids first and your family first and everybody else first other than herself. And I said, the true thing is, and she was very religious, and I said the true thing is that God taught you and wants you to put you first because the temple lies within you. And as a result of that, of you putting everybody else first, you're not putting that relationship with God, your inner temple, first. And I said, and if you don't, then you're teaching your children that they shouldn't put themselves first and they shouldn't honor that temple. And so therefore you're blocking your children from having a life of happiness and joy. And so you have to be an example for them. And so she really it really shifted something in her. I mean, of course, it shifts something for the moment, then you go back out into your old habits. So you have to kind of really teach them how to coach themselves. And so you have to really just kind of do a mind shift with them. And, energetically, you can help raise their frequency or their energy, which maybe sounds a little woo-woo to other people, but the truth is that raising frequency is just raising awareness. And if you start to look at that on from a psychology point, to me, it's just the first step of emotional intelligence, which is self-awareness. And so it really, that was one thing for me is like I couldn't just do the woo-woo. I had to start understanding it on both sides. It had to really make sense because a lot of the spiritual jargon that we use can be related to in other areas of life, so people can understand it. I mean, I like the spiritual woo. I think it's fun, to be honest with you, but the logical mind has to have something. So you're really just trying to get those two hemispheres to the brain to go in sequence in order and balance each other. And so that's kind of what a session looks like. I don't necessarily like doing the um, just the giving them answers. I like to lead them to their answers.
Mm.
I mean, I'll give them a nudge in a sense and give them a new way to look at it, but they have to make those choices themselves because the truth is that people have to heal themselves. And if it's handed to them, it doesn't really it doesn't really help them. So
Yeah. And, I like that, you have the background in corporate where you're working with people who are probably not thinking about their spiritual life much. They're
yeah.
thinking about work. And but you need those two pieces because you see one side where they're like, yeah, just sit there like The Secret. Just sit there and imagine yourself in the car and it's coming and you're like, no, no, it's not just coming. You have to do something. So even in the example you gave of the woman, yes, she had to make that shift, but number two, when she starts to go back to her old behaviors, she not only has to be aware of it, but she has to do some different action or at least have some different thought to move
Mhm.
to where she wants to be instead of going back to the old familiar.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's one of those things too. It's like this is one thing all of us can probably relate to. When we're younger, or we've got even throughout our life we've been in same consistent types of relationships, whether they be romantic or friendship or otherwise. We continue to have the same types of people around us. Sometimes that can be good, and sometimes that can be bad. And so the ones that are more toxic, this is what we can relate to. We can say, why does this keep on happening to me? Why do I keep on ending up in these same type of relationships and same type of jobs? Well, that's because there's a part of you that relates to that, because what did Socrates say? Likes attract like. And so it's not necessarily about attraction. You will go into a room and the person that you're going to be drawn to is going to be the one that's very similar to you and has lessons that you need to understand about yourself. So I actually had to do this to myself a while back, and I would literally just kind of gently slap my hand, not hard, but I was like, no, because I could see in that person the exact same. Because I had a savior complex where I had to go and save people, and so I would just be like, no. And what it did is it just gave a small jolt to the mind and the body to say that is no longer a part of our paradigm. Now, there's an author out there named Catherine Ponder where she actually talks about, it's called the law of denial. And what you say is no to the old pattern, and then you say we deserve the best of everything, or we deserve people or relationships that are enriching, that enhance and build my life, and we need those, and we're saying that we expect those now. And so what you're doing is you're literally allowing a new transmitter in your brain to fire from the left hemisphere, and you're saying no to that old one because you want to break that pattern. And then when it starts to become habit, it connects to the right hemisphere of the brain. So I remember thinking that years ago because I learned that from, training people in corporate America. And I thought, well, I just got to retrain myself and retrain my mind. But like you mentioned, we have to actually build new habits. And is it easy? No, it's not always easy because some of those habits are very solidly ingrained in our body. And we have what is called generational trauma and generational belief systems. And we have trauma and belief systems that we formed in this lifetime that we've decided that this is true. And then we have ones that were given to us. And then if you believe in past lives, then you have ones that are, based on past lives. And so there's a lot of information in there that's stored energetically in the body. And so then what we do is we have to start changing the energy, because and one of the greatest things that I learned from a friend of mine is that energy never goes anywhere, but how do you want the dynamics of those energies to work? So
Mm.
there's what is called the law of transmutation in Hermetic natural law. So that law of attraction, when you're sitting there for that Corvette, but there's a program and then it says absolutely not. The action you have to take is the steps to take towards that, so you'll believe it, and then you've earned it, because nothing just dropped into our lap will appreciate. It's like many years when I was a kid, I wanted a Nintendo gaming system, the original one in 1987. And my mother made me put my $5 allowance aside every 2 weeks, and then until I had $20, and then we went into Walmart and we put a payment down at the layaway, and then I just made payments on it until I got up to $80, and my mother paid the rest of it off. I think it was $120. And so, but the point was, is that, yeah, law of attraction gravitated and brought that to me. And it moved faster than I thought because mom went and paid for the rest of it. But what it was is that it made me appreciate that. So, and people don't want to put in the work. Like I laughed and said, "Do you really want somebody to come up to you and say, 'Hey, by the way, I'm a doctor and I'm going to do your surgery tomorrow?'" And you're like, "Oh, great. What medical school did you go to?" And they're like, "Oh, I haven't finished yet, but I'm going to, but I'm still going to do your surgery." You'd be like, "Ah, no." They have to do the things to prepare to do that. And
Mhm.
so, and that's what the universe does for us. So,
Exactly. And I was thinking of those shifts, those habits are so like a default, it's so easy to fall back in them. And sometimes we actually have to change our identity. Not like I'm going to say, oh, I'm changing my name. I'm not going to be Kristen, not like
right.
that. But sometimes we have to choose who we want to be when
Mhm.
we wake up in the morning. We have to choose, okay, well, this is me in this role, but now I want to be something else. And you can't be the new thing from the old place where you are. You actually have to change, like you said, your story. You have
Mhm.
to kind of rewrite that story. So when you're working with people, do you help them with that or just show them the differences?
I'll work with them on changing their story, because you have to give people a new perspective, and sometimes they're so deep down the rabbit hole in an area of whatever they're in, a victim or their horrible circumstances. I mean, some people have had lives that are such a nightmare, especially childhoods, that they have to have somebody give them a little bit of help on in that area, and just a little bit of a gentle nudge. Now, it's interesting because you have to really pay attention to what's going on with somebody, because you can't just always give them something, because they'll take it like you're lecturing them or that you're putting them down, or a lot of people say a new thought. They'll say, well, new thought just misses the fact that some people just can't overcome their stuff and it's just all fluff, fluff, and woo woo. And I'm like, well, sort of. It's also about um, helping people understand who they are. So, rewriting a story, you have to ask them, well, what kind of story do you want? You know,
Mm-hmm.
and a lot of times they'll say, I don't know. And then you have to lead them to the understanding, well, what I do know is that being a child of God, and I always use this phrase, we're divine royalty. I mean, if we're children of this being that created everything that we're a part of, then I can hardly believe that that being, that consciousness, wanted us to come down here to this planet to suffer. And maybe we came down here to have an experience, and then we shed away that suffering so that we can finally step into that divine royalty state. And so, with that being said, you just kind of lead them down this path of, hey, I deserve better.
Mm-hmm.
And so, and whatever that better looks like for them. I had a lady, she was in her 70s. And for her, better was sitting in her lazy boy reading books or going out to the beach and reading books. She'd already traveled all over the world. She'd already literally been on a Harley Davidson motorcycle with a handsome man, driving in the desert and out in Arizona, and she's had all the adventure. She's
Mm-hmm.
been around all kinds of people. But for her, she wanted to have peace, and then she wanted to get lost in the adventures of her books. And I was like, well, there you go, do that. But what happens is they get caught up on your story, because I'll tell my story a little bit, because I want to give them permission based on example. But you have to kind of get them lead to them to their own pool of water, so to speak, and say, it's okay to drink out of this. It's okay to enjoy your life based on how you want it to look. And we were basically just leading them to their own permission. So, but they get, people get really hung up on, I don't want that life, and then they get confused on, well, am I being dumb? Should I have this life? I'm like, no. We get really caught up in self-criticism and judgment. And so, but if we really relate, if we really start paying attention to ourselves, we'll listen to it. I call this probably about 11 years ago. I was sitting there and I was in meditation and I heard like this thousand voices going off. And 11 years ago, I was kind of afraid to talk about this because I was like, somebody's gonna want to put me into a mental ward for having voices talking to me. But it was literally just all the emotions and energy that was going on inside of me. And I remember I was on a stage because I was a public speaker and I in my mind and I thought, stop, just stop. Everybody, I love you all. I want to hear every single one of you, but I can't possibly hear you all. And literally, they just stopped. And I said, I literally imagined a little microphone being in the middle of a room, and everybody walk up one at a time and tell me your concerns. And so they started walking up one at a time and telling me their concerns. And some of it was the little boy from like 7 years old that
Mhm.
was crying. And then there was a 5-year-old little boy because my mother had just passed away the year and a half before that says, I miss mommy, and all this kind of stuff. And I had to give love to every one of those and listen. And what those energies really wanted was for me to listen because they were like, all these years, all this time,
Mhm.
you have not paid attention to us. And finally, I just got into my heart and I said, I am so sorry. I am so sorry that I didn't listen. I didn't know any better. And so that began the idea that if we change our inner dynamics, our inner world, and actually give attention and love to this part of ourselves that's begging you to have a relationship with it, that inner temple, that inner world, then you'll change everything in your life because it's that inner voice, that those inner dynamics that's holding you back in your life. And it's because you'll want to do something and then that voice will say, no, 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 it's too scary. Well, that could be the 7-year-old boy that was too terrified to move forward. Or it could be the time recently I just had a dream pop up and I was doing some deep work and my mother and I were in a fire when I was 3 years old. And I remember very specifically, she ran in and woke me up and said, Jer, Jer, grab you put your slippers on and put your robe on, but don't do anything else. Let's go. And we went to the front door and she put her hand on the door and it was hot. And we went out on the balcony and the firefighters came up and got us. While my mother was, and my dream was saying, Jer, crying. And I was like, it's okay, mommy. Everything's going to be okay. Well, in the dream, I said to the firefighter, no, 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 take my mommy first. And so I had to call my cousin and ask if that was true because it was really, and she said, I don't know if you said that, but I do know that your mother was crying and she was holding on to you and you guys came down and you had a lot of trauma surrounding that. Well, those things come up in our dreams because there's something for us to take a look at. They're opportunities. They're not meant to scare us, but they're meant for us to look at it. Well, what I looked at is I realized all my life I had put everybody else first, including at 3 years old, I wanted them to save my mother first and not me. Of course, they took me down first, but it was just one of those things where you have to start looking at these patterns in your life. And so, and that's one of the things I do is I start looking at the patterns with people and saying, all right, wait, stop right there. Do you see what happened? And it's not meant for us to feel guilty. It's best for us just to look at it because as the four agreements says, we literally did the best we could
Mhm.
with what we had. But when we start to change those patterns, I call them Fritzy loops. They literally just loop and loop, or some people call it the hamster wheel. And you've been sitting on that hamster wheel since you were like 3. Like Albert Einstein said, you expected a different result each time, and it just
Mhm.
didn't happen. Well, when you break those patterns, and by the way, they're in layers. So when I know everybody can relate to this, I thought I dealt with this before,
Mhm.
10 years ago. Well, if they come in layers, as you start to release healing and open yourself up, there's a hermetic natural law called the law of transmutation. As you start to transmute that energy, then what happens is like beach balls underwater, they start to surface. as you look at them. Because what you've done is you pushed them underwater, you put them on the shelf until you're ready to look at them. And so when you start to evolve, it's a compliment to you that you have to really look at it, because you've literally done more work and you're up leveling so you can release more. I don't know if it's okay if we do a really quick exercise. Will your
Yeah,
listeners do?
that'd be great.
So everybody put their hands out like the fists. And you just put, as you hold them out, I want you to close your eyes and I want you to pretend in your left hand that there is a bucket in your left hand and that somebody's pouring water in that left hand, in that bucket. And so they're pouring water in that bucket with your left hand, and your left hand starts getting heavier and heavier and heavier. And so they pour more water in and more water in and more water in, and your left hand starts getting heavier and heavier with the water going into that bucket. So on your right hand, there's 100 balloons that you're holding on to. And so that 100 balloons makes that your right hand lighter and lighter. And so what ends up happening is most of you probably start to see a sensation. Kimberly's hands get a little lower there because of that bucket.
Mhm.
So now you can just drop the bucket. And feel that energy. What's that's doing with intention? You're literally telling yourself that this hand is getting heavier and heavier. Well, why that's important when we're talking about energy work in the body is this: all those heavy thoughts, all those things of depression, because depression means depressed thoughts. You're depressing down on yourself. So if you start to look at that and you start to say, you can sit inside of yourself and just breathe. That's one of the things I do with my clients. I literally, in a session, we might just sit there and breathe. And sometimes they get a little annoyed with me. They're like, I'm paying you to just breathe. Well, what breathing does is it takes your mind and puts it into a gamma state of frequency. And that is a type where the DNA and the energy are the parts of the body actually start to open up to allow healing to happen faster. And so when you start with, so what I do is I teach my clients just sit there. You can watch television. It's okay. I'm not one of those people that I never watch television. But what I do is I literally sit there and watch television. I'll breathe in through the nose, out through the mouth. And I'll look for those heavy places in my body that you felt like the bucket. And then I'll just sit there with that and I'll say, tell me what this is all about. So that's the voices I saw on that stage. And I said, give me, what's going on. And sometimes I won't really feel or hear a lot. I'll just start to breathe and I'll just breathe and feel that energy, that tightness, that heaviness melt away. And so what you're doing is you're starting to break apart these patterns that you've literally stuffed down into your body. And so what's happened is, especially women have this, but men have it too. It's just different dynamics where we don't speak up. And this energy, if you're into the whole chakras and stuff like this, is about empowerment. And it's about living our truth. And so um, if you start to look at that with people and say, okay, well, where have you not spoken your truth for your own self? Where have you lacked boundaries in your life? That's the solar plexus. And then people are like, I have boundaries. I'm like, okay, well, let me ask you a question. If you've ever been in a time in your life when you just wanted to hang out at home and relax and watch TV and, make dinner and stuff like that, but all your friends were like, no, come on out, let's do this. And you really, all your whole being just needed to rest and just relax, but you went out anyways. And they're like, well, yeah, I've done that before. You didn't have boundaries right there.
Mhm.
It's not about boundaries are not actually for other people. They're actually for you. And so that's just a clear example of, or you did a New Year's resolution. I'm going to lose weight this year. I'm just to like to eat better and all that other kind of stuff. And then the next thing you know, 2 days later, you're eating the biggest piece of chocolate cake and you go on a bender and eating all kinds of food. That's lack of boundaries. And why is that understanding? Because you don't want to you're walking over that line where you're making yourself no longer a priority. You're in your habits. And that's actually a part of the limbic brain. I'm sorry, the reptilian brain. The reptilian brain is instinctual. And so it's one of those things where I always say how you can understand the reptilian brain is if you ever got a sales call, like one of those telemarketer calls, what's your first instinct? Well, most people's first instinct is to hang up.
Mhm.
That's because there's a part of you that's like, oh, I can't believe this. And so Well, I teach salespeople that you have to get past that part of your brain, that instinctual brain, to get them into the Olympian brain.
Mhm.
And the Olympian brain is based on emotions or feelings and stuff like that. And I just say, you have to get past that because people don't buy on logic, they buy on emotions.
Mhm.
So for you as a person, you have to sell yourself on yourself. You have to get yourself past that instinctual part of yourself. And the only way to do that is through love of yourself. So my clients always get this exercise, and it really, you could just see their mind just go. I'm like, I want you to go stand in front of the mirror every day, looking at yourself in the eye for 5 minutes, and I want you to say, I love you. And you should see the scared look on people's face. Like they're just like so awkward. And then most of them always come back a week later when they have their session with me, and I'm like, how does your homework go? And you can just see their disappointment and all that they don't want to disappoint me. And I'm like, oh, stop. This isn't about me. This is about you. And so look at me. I'll make them look at me eye to eye because this is when you look at me eye to eye, you're facing yourself
Mhm.
because we're a mirror of each other. And so they they get uncomfortable. I said, stop. Because here's the deal. You're now criticizing yourself. And this is a great exercise for me to get them to look at how horribly we judge ourselves because we're so unaware. We get it. We're say we're our own but worst critic. But the truth is that we're unwilling to dive into those small little crazy little things because that's where it all happens. So my teacher, I'm sorry, I'm just talking a whole lot here, but my teacher years ago, um, I used to tell her I didn't like crumpled up Kleenexes, and she said, "Why? That's so silly." Well, come to find out, I remember my mother and my grandmother used to just leave them around the house, and it used to just gross me out.
Oh, I like
Yeah, and
that.
so you know, and then but it caused a trigger. And what my teacher was trying to show me is this: every little thing that triggers you, just take a look at it. It doesn't mean you might go back and say, oh, I still don't really like that, but really where she got it is she'd say, Jeremy, I want you to go in and grab my purse because I want to get something out of it. And so I went in there and I grabbed it. She goes, reach in and grab this, and I was like, I didn't want to do it. I was like, oh, well, I don't want to reach into your purse. That's just weird. And at that time I was 35, and she was like, you were a 35-year-old man, and literally an old lady's purse practically brought you to your knees. I'm like, well, I don't know what's in there. That could be weird. And she's like, for goodness sakes. And so she goes, that's what you want to take a look at. And it makes us laugh and it's silly. But why? Well, because there's a program in me that says you don't go into women's purses and that there could be weird stuff in there.
Mhm.
And it's the unknown. And but if a woman says, go in there and grab my wallet, she's giving you permission to go into her private space. Don't be
Mhm.
ridiculous. So it's kind of like a man having to go get tampons for his wife. It really scares him and freaks him out. We laugh about it, but why? And so that's what I spent a lifetime of asking those questions with myself. And sometimes like I still don't like driving in mountains. Like it freaks me out, except for the Tennessee mountains. I'm usually okay, but Montana mountains, it's okay to say that these are things I just don't like doing. But after you've asked why, so yeah.
Well, I am loving this conversation, but I know you have some things coming up, and I know there's people that would love to connect with you in some way. So at this point, why don't you tell us where can they connect with you and tell us about your events coming up? And I know you have a book, and this is the part where you get to do self-promotion and tell us all about you and how we can connect with you.
Well, the best way to connect with me is my website, which is called thestorytellingalchemist.com. And that I have a way you can email me, book sessions. My book is on there. It's called Peace Be Still. Well, my one that I wrote by myself. And so there's also, if you go on Amazon, there's plenty of books where I'm a collaboration in the art of connection and several others that I've been a part of. But I have an event that's coming up this coming up weekend. It's April 26th to the 28th. And it's called Beyond the Veil, Exploring Mediumship and More. And so Dr. Raymond Moody is going to be one of our keynote speakers, and Jenny Marie from the show TLC's Mama Medium is going to be one of our speakers. and it's all about exploring that afterlife, or that if is there an afterlife, and that kind of stuff, and really trying to help people connect and understand that there is a other side where people that have passed away, they're living an existence or a life that really very happy. So that's coming up. And then have another event in December, which I would love for everybody to come to because it's going to be a lot of fun. It's called the Spirit Heart Cruise, and we're leaving out of Galveston, Texas, and we're going and taking people to the Mayan ruins. And I don't know if you remember earlier, my mother was a shaman. She was elevated to Mayan shaman by a gentleman named Dennis Alexander, who lived in Honduras for 15 years, and he was elevated to shaman. They called him the White Shaman. And so my mother apprenticed with him. She elevated him, or he elevated her to shaman as well. So I wanted to honor my mother by taking people to the Mayan ruins. So that's going to be a pretty incredible journey as well. So
And when
lots
did
of
you
stuff
say that
going on.
was?
December 8th out of
December 8th.
Galveston.
Okay.
So, and then that's part of my journey, is to really just help give people experiences that change their lives. So.
Oh, awesome. Yeah. And your book that you wrote on your own, just tell me a little bit about that.
So that's where you're going to get to know a lot more about me. So I wrote that, and well, now 12 years ago. Um, it seems like that just flew by. But so it talks about how I found peace in my life, and I give the how to do that in people's own lives. So when you read it, it's not just reading about my story, but I'm helping you understand how to do it for yourself. And this is where you get to know me a little bit more. I was a big party boy when I was in my 20s, and I was addicted to crystal meth, and I had a sex addiction. And so one of the things I had to start doing is doing this process I teach people, or I do sessions with people on. I teach them how to do that with their own addictions, because we all have them. It could be to ice cream, it could be to everything else, and that's where you're avoiding yourself at some level. And so, yeah, that's what Peace Be Still is all about. And it helps teach you the beginning stages of how to alchemize yourself and find inner peace. So, yeah.
That is awesome. So now I have a personal question. What gives you the most happiness and fulfillment in your life at this point?
Oh, wow. Biggest thing is I love connecting with people, and I love helping people change their lives, and teaching that just really lights my life up. But I love traveling too. And so if I could travel, teach, and meet new people, I would probably just be the happiest person in the world, which I do pretty much now. Um, and so it's just so if there's ever an event that people want me to come and speak at, and there's a means for me to get there, or you provide the means for me to get there, the answer is probably going to be yes, because it's really just such an exceptional feeling for me to meet new people and help inspire them. And to get that, I literally just spoke at an event recently, and they said to me, "You were here last year, and I want to let you know that your class that you taught changed and shaped my life in the direction I'm at." And that's like the best compliment for a teacher, is to know that you've helped somebody change their lives. And so, yeah, that brings me a lot of joy.
Yes. Well, thank you so much for being on the podcast today and for all your wisdom. I know we'll be thinking about what you were talking about for a while.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I really appreciate being here.
Yeah. So I have one last question before we finish. What is your best advice on living an incredible, amazing life?
Live in the now of the moment. And the reason why I say that is this: we spend a lot of time living in the past and living in the future. And so when you live in this moment, live it to the fullest. I mean, there is just, because tomorrow might not be there. And I said, so really just spend time every day. I literally get up in the morning and I say to myself, like Christmas morning, when you were a kid and you got up and you were rushing out to that tree because you wanted to see those toys. Well, I act like life is like that. So every morning I say to God, surprise me,
Hmm.
just like it would be Christmas morning. And so you'll spend the day living in the now of the moment, and these little nuggets of things will happen, and it'll be just so exciting. Like, well, yes, when you contacted me about coming on the show, it was like, oh, that's so cool. And so there's no reason why you can't live in the now of the moment and be like a little kid sometimes. And because it even says in spiritual texts, the one that is childlike inherits the kingdom of heaven. And what that means is that enjoy your life.
Mhm.
And so, and you'll really have a great life. So that's what I can leave with everybody.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. It's been a lot of fun.
And we'll talk to you again soon.
Bye bye.